So hey everyone, welcome to the webinar, 12 Things You Did Wrong Launching Your Podcast That Are Killing Your Growth. I'm not live. You guys are catching this on the replay, but that's okay because I just want to make sure that you guys get it. And I can't do this every week. So I just really want to make sure you get this information because we are seeing again and again people who are launching and then not succeeding, or launching and giving up too quickly when they could be just making some of these small tweaks and adjustments. So these 12 things that I've chosen for you, they are, the things you might have done wrong when you set up your podcast. They are advice that you may have gotten. They are the things that might be killing your growth and maybe even killing your monetization. So let's get on with it. Welcome to 12 Things You Did Wrong Launching Your Podcast That Are Killing Your Growth. And, this is interesting webinar for us to be doing today. So why is it that we can talk to you about this? So I'm Tracy Hazzard. I'm an Authority Magazine and Inc. columnist. And for Authority Magazine, I interview top podcasters. So I've interviewed over 25 podcasters, and I think there's probably like another 10 in the queue. So I'm constantly interviewing them and I'm asking them, how are you successful? What's making your success? What are you doing that's different? And why is it working? And what did you do to launch? I'm always asking them about their launch. The other thing is that I'm the co-host of 4 podcasts myself. Feed Your Brand is one of them, Product Launch Hazard, The New Trust Economy, and my very first one, WTFFF 3D Printing. And so, I've been through it, and I've launched 4 over the last 5 years. So I have a sense of what it takes to launch, and what it takes to launch today, and what it took to launch before, and what's different. On top of that, I'm co-founder of Podetize.com with my husband and partner, Tom Hazzard, and Podetize.com is a hosting and production service platform. So we do both. So we have over 220 podcasts that we've launched and hosted within the last couple of years. So we have some sense of what's working and what's not. And very clearly here we see that, while most of you might know this, that the fast path to getting more, to getting my Inc. column is exactly what it is, to getting speaking on stages, getting books, getting more time to network and do all the things that you want to do, all of those things happen because of our podcast. And are probably happening for you too, but maybe they're not. Maybe it's just not quite good enough yet. Maybe it just needs a little touch, a little tweak, a little push in the right direction. And maybe some of the tips that our top podcasters and our system and what we do and what we've seen work again and again and again can work for you. So that's what today is about. So I want to just go back and give you a little bit of history on Tom and I. So we started a 3D print podcast back in early 2015 called WTFFF 3D Printing. We were working on the launch in 2014, but we launched in 2015, and we have over 560 episodes today. So we have experience with having a breadth of podcast episodes, and what do you do with them, and what happens to them, and what happens to them when you stop podcasting or you decrease your efforts, because we definitely drop down. We maybe do 1 a quarter or something like that just to keep it active whenever something interesting and new is, but pretty much we don't. Yet we still have a high number of listeners there. So part of it is our experience doing that. And then this past year, I launched another podcast called The New Trust Economy with a co-host, not my husband and partner, but with Monica Profit. So it's Profit and Hazard on The New Trust Economy. And I went from host of a podcast to Larry King in 30 days. So from the day I launched on January 20th, on February 20th, I appeared on Larry King, and you can see me on Skype in the top of the screen there. And that's really fast authority. But more importantly, that took me to just last week. I did a stage in New York for 200 investing women at really top level of their game in New York, and that was fabulous. And that all happened from starting the podcast. So what you see is an acceleration of authority. So things are happening, and part of it is the industry, and that podcasters are in high demand. And part of it is the shift in the industry, because even though it seems like everybody's talking about podcasts and everybody and their brother is a podcast host, the reality is out of the 705,000 estimated podcasts, there are only 140,000 active. So that's a really interesting statistic. It means that some of them didn't succeed. Some of them didn't take. Some of them aren't moving forward. And why is that? And what's going on? And we see a lot of that. And we think that a lot of those mistakes are coming from bad setups, from bad planning to begin with, from starting a podcast for the wrong reasons, from not getting enough fast enough so you give up quicker, And then some of it is just strategic. I just did it and I wanted, 25 episodes and I'm done. It's like I wrote a book. So that can happen too. But out of 140,000 active, that's way less than the 1.4 or 5 or 6 billion, I don't even know what it is today, websites on Google. You're getting a lot more for what's happening today by being a podcast host. And that's that accelerated authority I talked about. So let's check. Let's see how you're doing. So let's look at some of the old school of podcasting ideas. The old school was, it's all about me. DIY is fine. Do it in your garage, in your car, in your closet. Passive income is easy. That was the model of old school of podcasting. We're going to talk a little bit of new school where we're talking about raised authority. And sometimes raised authority is just a little bit higher than the other people. I'm kind of short, so a few inches more of height in my industry is going to go a long, long way. It doesn't need to be this giant stage that you're creating or this giant audience. It might just be an increase of where you are today. So why doesn't, though, that old school still work? Here, the 75 million monthly savvy listeners are smarter now. They have more to choose from that are better production value. You have pro competition. You have Gimlet, you have iHeart, you have New York Times. Those are some of the biggest production houses around building shows, and they're producing the shows not just on the production value that's going underneath it, they're planning the shows. So they're doing TV style production with them. So that in and of itself is part of your competition issues. So you can't just do it yourself everything. You've got to have some quality guidelines. The media ad model is completely broken. I'm going to give a speech and actually moderate a panel with Amazon and top ad players. And we're really talking about the ad system is completely broken. And so there's not a lot of trust in the podcast ad model. It's also not working really well for people. So that's an issue as to why the passive income isn't easy. There is a lot of paying for listeners going on. There wasn't before, but there is now. And to be honest with you, you're not actually an early entrant, even though 140,000 is pretty small. So that is pretty early, but you're not an early entrant into the game, so you can't make some of the mistakes that the early guys did. So let's go into the 12 things. The 12 things you might have done wrong, you probably did do wrong, launching your podcast that are actually killing your growth today. So here's the first one. So many of you have your face on your podcast cover art. You need to get your face off of your cover art. One day I'm going to give this talk and someone whose cover art I'm showing here is going to be in the audience. I know it's going to happen. But this is the thing. Who are these people? Do I even know these people? And do I care about these people? The problem with putting your face on there is that it's not really about branding you. I know that sounds like a good strategy. I know a lot of marketing agencies do it, and that's exactly where most of these kinds of cover arts come from. They come from marketing agencies and branding, people advising you. But the reality is that what does that say? It says it's all about me and not about you, the listener. And that's the problem right there. When I've got other things to choose from that seem like they're educating me, entertaining me, and doing other things out there, and I can pick and choose, and instead I have someone who I have no idea who they are, then how do I trust them? Why would I go there? Your name is on there. That's good enough for a start, a launch. After that, when you have a big following and you're spinning off your shows and you're doing that, feel free to put your face on it all you want then, because that's in it when you're drawing them specifically to you. But if your plan is to only use the exact audience you have today and maybe at people you meet along the way and have them be your only listeners, then go ahead and put your face on it. Otherwise, we really suggest you get it out of being all about you and into being all about your listener. That ties into our number 2 thing. Our number 2 thing is most of you are not using the 4,000 character description that iTunes allows you to. So just a little word about iTunes here. iTunes is a search engine. So it's not as sophisticated a search engine as Google is, but it is a search engine, and there are only a handful of things that it searches through. It searches through title, it searches through subtitle, it searches through host name, it searches through description and tags. So for you not to use all 4,000 characters of the description, and the old school of podcasting was like, only this tiny blurb shows, so that's all you need to write, is only this tiny blurb. That's not enough. That was about 250 characters, maybe 300 characters. you've not taken out the opportunity to embed that with great things that people would find you and that would be about the show and would attract them to you and things you could help them with. That's an opportunity to really expand on what your show is going to be about and how it's going to help. So here's another tip on that. Here is my way that I teach all of our podcasters to both write their description and do their introductory episode, which is always a huge mistake as well. Typically, when you do an introduction episode, they script them and you read them, and it's a huge problem because when you do that, it sounds so low energy that it doesn't attract people into your show. And I know you want to get it right. Bullet points are fine, but really don't script this. So what I'm telling you to do it in a rehearsal. If you haven't done this yet, if you are missing and skipped your introductory episode, the episode that tells everybody what things are about, you can add it later. Go back and do this for yourself. And you may want to do it again. So sometimes we replace those episodes, and you have to be careful replacing it because you could kill your statistics. So you have to do it right. But if you can always replace it, let's say your show model changes, you can do a new number one episode, do a new introduction episode, and follow this formula. Number one, spend about 5 minutes or more on the listener. What about the listener are they struggling with? Are they aspiring to? What are they out there looking for, and why should they be attracted to the show? The next thing you want to talk about for another 5 minutes, and not longer than that, you want to keep it nice and short. You want to explain only the part of your story or your history, your resume, about why you're the perfect person to host this podcast and address the issues that the listener's going through. So if it's a story, tell it. This is a great place for a story, but don't tell your entire history. No one wants to hear the whole resume on episode 1 because again, then it's all about you. The only thing I want to know is why are you relevant and why should I care? And then I'll see if I like you later and if I'm going to get to know you. Then the last thing you want to put in there for your last 5 minutes or even just a couple of minutes is your show expectations. What is your show going to be about? What is it like? Do you do interviews? Do you do all these things? So if you already have a show, you know exactly what it's going to be about, so you can talk more intelligently than maybe you did in your very first version of your first episode where you didn't know what your show was going to be like, and now that you're 20 episodes in or something, you know exactly what it's like. So doing that, remember, don't script, just straight record this, transcribe it, and then edit it and turn it into your 4,000 character description. It's exactly what we do here for our clients. So this is a great way for you to beef up your listing and help yourself get more listeners today. Intros and outros are the other biggest thing I hear again and again from hosts and from listeners. The intros, outros are key. Not having one is a sign of being too cheap and too do-it-yourself and not pro enough to compete in today's world. They expect it. However, they don't want a really long one because people binge listen. And when they binge listen, they don't want to have your intro again and again and again and again. And so I have had many, many podcasters, especially ones that came from radio and then move over to podcast, who have these introductions that are like 2-3 minutes long sometimes. I mean, they're crazy long. Do not do that. Make it really short, make it really sweet, make it to the point, make sure they just know they're in the right place. And you don't have to make this complicated. It doesn't have to be something that's different every single time, because when you start up the show, you're gonna say, hey, welcome back. Today we have a great guest and I'm super excited about this, and whatever you're going to say, you're gonna do that more personal intro. The other thing that I want you guys to really think hard about, and this is sort of still a part of number 3 on your intro outros, is get yourself a real voice of authority. Don't introduce yourself. This is a huge mistake. When people hear it, when you're talking about introducing yourself, it sounds really self-promoting, and it's really not good. So I remember back when Stephen Colbert took over the Late Show, or whatever the show is called that he does, and when he took over, he did his own intro for about a week, and then sure enough, they changed it. There's a reason for that. In professional shows, you need someone who has the voice of authority introducing you and raising your level of authority and saying, hey, this person's worth listening to. So you don't want to be the person who does your own intro. Don't do that. You can do your own outro, but again, I like to use the voice of authority because if I'm going to promote something, I want to have served all in the middle my audience and then have somebody else do the sales pitch. I mean, that's kind of what it is. Sending them to the website, asking them for reviews. I don't want to be the person who does that. I might do it within the show when I ask them and make a call to action for something that I need, because then when I do it, it's more like a favor. But when it's in the outro, it's more like a commercial. So we really want to make sure that you're using the voice of authority to help improve your intro, outro. So let's go on. Number 4. Microphones, equipment, like the whole thing. The number one thing is that you guys overbuy. We see it all the time. You have equipment that is so expensive that it's too good for the space you're recording in. So my partner and husband, Tom Hazzard, did mic comps. He did a whole microphone competitive analysis, and it's at podetize.com/mic. And it has an incredible, I mean, he went into great detail. He did sound differences. He unboxed them. There's videos, there's audio. It's incredible. Go there, check it out. And what we've come down to is that the microphones that are typically dynamic mics under $100 or around $100 are the best ones for utilizing in environments where, like, whether it's your office or it's out in a hotel room because you're traveling. I take an ATR 2050 every time I travel, and that's really the best microphone. And it's really helped us because it doesn't pick up that sort of ambient sound that tends to be in the hotels, and you have the overpowering air conditioning and all of that. It's really great. It's just a direct record mic. So it's the professional version of the ATR 2100, which is typically what you can find on Amazon. And so using those mics are really great because the dynamic makes you record directly into them. But here's the tip that you guys don't know. It costs you so much more in time and editing if you choose a mic that is overpowered for the environment. So if you're picking up every little sound, somebody has to take that out. So it's either going to be you, or it's going to be someone you're paying, and now you're going to be paying too much for that. So number 5 is the same thing. This recording quality counts, but recording quality about where you record matters. So we hear it all the time. It used to be record in your car. I can tell you, you know the difference when somebody recorded in your car. You can absolutely tell because the fire department goes through, the horns beep. There's more editing required by doing it in your car than anywhere else. The other one we hear is record in your closet. While that's great, the sound is usually fairly good in there. And if I'm going to do a voiceover, I might go into my closet and do it. But the reality is it's unprofessional. Are you going to Zoom with someone and do an interview in there in your closet? It's just not a good idea. So unless you're really just solo shows, totally on your own, and it's where you want to hang out and you're comfortable in your closet, or maybe you have an amazing closet, the dream walk-in closet, that's great and still really has great sound, okay, then go ahead and do it. But we say, you know what, you need to record where you're the most comfortable, where you're the most professional, so you can produce the most professional show. And the reality is at the end of the day, that will reduce the time and energy and money that you have to pay to edit the show to begin with. So it's definitely better to record properly, get with the right equipment and in the right space, than it is to spend the time and energy and money in editing later. The number 6 thing is something that's a little controversial. I call them authority thieves. And these are just some of the authority thieves. There's even more. There's a lot of the ones that are requiring you to, or recommend you use their free tools to record. Those ones are stealing your authorities. If you read the fine print, we've had many clients who cannot capture their show. They can't keep their show anymore because it was recorded by a radio station, or it was recorded within the Anchor app, or it was recorded within a tool that did the recording for them. You will lose the IP. You will lose your show if you want to move it later. So it's not necessarily a bad thing for you to start out with something, but keep that in mind. So free is not really free. Free accounts, you typically don't have rights to your show either. They can put ads on them. They can do a lot of those things. So being really careful where you're going with the authority thieves is really important. So, and it's controversial here because iTunes is also your biggest promoter, but they're an authority thief, right? They don't share their subscribers with you. It's your show, and yet you don't know who's listening. So anyone who does that, whether it's a social media platform, whether it's a directory, whether it's your host, anyone who does that is stealing your authority. And that's not okay with me. because we want you to have authority. Because what happens when they decide to sell their business? It just happened with Anchor and Spotify. What happens if they decide to close up shop? What happens if they decide that they want to change their model of business and now they're placing ads all over your show and you didn't opt in, you didn't give them a right to do that? And what if they change their algorithm like they did to all the YouTubers? And when they shift their algorithm, all of a sudden your monetization drops, your show drops. Libsyn did this a couple of years ago. They changed the formula by which they were calculating plays, and they cut many of our podcasters' plays in half. And when they came back over to their platform, they were like, what's going on? Because our stats on our platform was really tracking actual plays. And what was happening was over on Libsyn, they were changing their model and percentage cutting the actual plays you were getting. They were cutting it down to comply with the new advertisers they were going to bring in. But the reality is 98% of the people on their platform was never going to take advantage of that advertising platform. So the ones who were taking ads and who were using the value of their show, the number of plays to get great guests, were hurt overnight. We can't have that happen to you. So you've got to drive your traffic. You've got to make sure you retain that. So choosing carefully your host is a significant part of that. Choosing carefully whether or not you utilize the free tools, the free accounts. And most importantly, making sure you send everything out to your own website. And here's the thing. In the Apple Podcast app, there's a website link and there's an episode web page link. And sometimes those links are circumvented by your host. The host puts their URL or their, it might say SoundCloud, listen to it on SoundCloud, and it's only where the SoundCloud is, not where the actual blog post is, not sending them back to your site. If that is happening, if they're circumventing your authority, you need to take that back. Now, there's a way to fix it in most places, but in some others, you know what? You don't have a right. They actually insert that for you, and you don't have a right to do that. The other thing that we look at from this thing, and I've got Blog Talk Radio kind of highlighted up there, letting a radio station syndicate you and turn you into podcasts can be a huge mistake. We've seen it again and again and again. A lot of times they have these very long intros. They put in ads for the radio station, and it's 5 minutes before your show ever plays. Plus, they don't do a good job of actually putting up your listing. They put a lot of information and a lot of materials in that are all about the radio station itself. So all of these people are stealing your authority and things that you're working so absolutely hard on. So we definitely want to make sure to change that. So that's one of the biggest, number 6 is one of the biggest mistakes we see, and it does hurt your potential money because it hurts the clients you might get from it, the traffic you might get. It hurts all of that if you're not pulling them off and getting them for yourself and finding out who your listeners really are and getting them to engage with you. Number 7's mistake is a seasonal mistake. And sometimes this is, you won't find this. You're maybe too early on. Unless you've hit over 300 episodes, you may not know about this from having an overall listing. But you may also have it if you were doing like 25 episode seasons and you thought that was a really great idea. So here's the mistake of what really happens. If you miss an entire month without posting a new episode, many of the directory apps, iTunes included and many of the others, they stop pushing your podcast to your listeners. So when you bring on your next season 2 months later, 3 months later, whatever that is, they have to actually know that you've launched a new season and go find it because it isn't being pushed forward to them. So what we recommend is don't go missing a whole month. Plan it out so you do your main 25 episodes, and then if you're going to take 2 months off, actually do 27 and give them one within the next month and one within the following month, and then start your new season so that you're keeping the feed active by the algorithm side, on the directory side, and you're kind of giving them bonuses, something to look forward to and wait on, and getting them anticipating the next season you're going to create. So that's one of those seasonal mistakes. Now, when you have a bigger one, what happens is after you hit 300 shows, what happens is your show starts to drop off. And so this is the same thing that happens when you're creating a new season. If you've got to create a past volume, a season 1 or a volume 1, because once you're off to 301, it no longer appears, a number 1 episode no longer appears on iTunes. So how do you fix that? Well, what we do is we spin off. And so we do spin-offs, and it's the same thing as if you were doing seasons. But here's the mistake most people make, is they take their existing show and they just start a new feed. So if we just started a new feed like the app guy here, and we just started a new feed with the Tech Startup Podcast, and we started that brand new feed, we have to start at ground zero and get listeners all over again. Now, we can make an announcement on our old show and make sure that they come over, but they won't all come over. They won't all remember to do that. So what we do here is we actually have on our Podetize platform 5 feeds per host. So it allows you to have these volumes to create 5 seasons if you need to. And what we recommend you do is you start your new season in the exact same feed, in your old feed, and you spin off the old episodes into a new feed. Because people are going to be coming in, and when they find the new seasons and see you have 2 seasons, they're going to subscribe to both now. So you're going to get the benefit. But the people who've already listened to season 1, who have been your loyal followers, they're ready for season 2. So by putting season 2 and by keeping your most current volume as your most active one, and always keeping that active feed as the ones where you're posting your new episodes, and everything else that you do being a spin-off or a new feed technically, will really help you in that. So these are some of the strategies we like to play, but it is a mistake because you're starting at ground zero if you start a brand new season and you start a brand new feed. Bots. Okay, cute little bots. Number 8, this is the thing that we forget. We think we're podcasters. We don't have to deal with this SEO stuff. We don't have to deal with these bots. We don't have to deal with search engine optimization, but you do. You do, because most search is happening on Google. Most search is happening when and where it happens, right? So you want to be relevant. 1 in 5 Google searches is brand new. They're looking for content. And it's where the search happens and when the search happens that matters the most. And the bots are in control of that. So this is what we also don't realize is pretty soon you're going to be asking for everything verbally, right? You're going to say, Alexa, play the Feed Your Brand podcast. You're going to have, say the same thing to Google Home. You're going to be doing all of that. And when we're not ready for that, when we haven't planned our show for that, when we haven't prepped it for being search friendly, the bots are going to hold us back from being found. So we want to make sure that you're being found in all of those places. That's why I go back to the number 2 one where we're changing your descriptions and using all 4,000 characters, because when that happens within the iTunes library, you want to be able to find you want to be able to find all of that. But what we find is more than 30% of our listenership, and sometimes as close as 60%, depending on the topic, happens over our clients' websites and happens from people finding them on Google. They don't happen from finding them in the podcast search directories. So while there's 75 million listeners every single month, there's way more people searching on Google every single day. Why should you not be present? So forgetting that you have to be friendly in the Google environment, that you should have a web blog. That's what really matters. And here's the thing, you have a tremendous advantage. The web blog length, the average web blog length, and only 55% of small businesses even have a blog, and they agonize to create it. 84% spend more than 3 hours. You guys record in 30 minutes more than they could ever write, because the average post length is 500 to 700 words. And the best length for Google is 2,500 plus words. Now, here's the little thing. The next slide is like a reminder to myself, and I should have taken it out. But the next slide reminds me that you guys also need to be on WordPress. Because if you're on Squarespace and Wix and podcast websites and all of these sites, what they're doing is they're blocking your search. And so what we found across all of the 220 plus shows that we have on our network, and the ones that we track their website stats with, because we track the stats side by side, what we're seeing is that the ones that don't have WordPress sites do significantly worse in organic keyword growth and organic traffic. So make sure you move your stuff onto WordPress. Number 9. Number 9 is my absolute favorite because, well, I invented this. So I came up with this early on. What happens so often is when we're creating these blogs, right? And so we've got these great long tail blog posts because you guys are speaking them and you're putting the full transcription out and you've got all the words in there, is you got to have a visual that goes with it, right? You want to have something to share on social media. You need to have something at the top of the blog. You need to have things that break it up. And so here's one of the best ways to do it. Those that are out there advising you, the same ones that are advising you to put your face on the cover art and naming the show after you, those are the ones who are making the bigger mistake. Because here, what we found is that when it's similar, when you've templatized the heck out of your header graphic, you get this thing that goes on that where people believe that they've seen it before. So we like to vary the color, the text, the shape, the picture behind it, the imagery. And we have a rule that our team who produces these for our clients is not allowed to repeat it in a given month. So they can't repeat. They can't have yellow type, 2 rows, 2 weeks in a row. It's not allowed. And so we do that because, here's what happened. It's one of my clients, she switched her website. She changed every single one of the graphics we created. Actually, her team changed it on her because they said it didn't look pretty on the blog page and they wanted it to comply with their brand. But the problem is when you scroll through your feed this quickly, they think they've seen it, heard it, they think it's a repeat. So this is exactly what she said. I advise my PR clients to never wear the same clothes in their videos so that people don't think they've already seen it. Well, it's the same thing with your headers, your graphics, and what you're sharing. And if you're sharing only your episode art again and again and again, you're making people think, I've already seen this, I've already heard it. They're ignoring it and they're not even seeing what the name of the new episode is or the name of the new guest. So be really careful and make sure that you are you're dressing up your blogs, you're dressing up your social posts. Number 10, measure all your stats. So this is the number one reason I find most people give up. So they give up because they aren't getting enough feedback. They aren't able to see that their podcast is doing well. So we have an attrition rate that typically happens at 11 episodes, at 23, and then at 100. So at 100, usually you've run your course, you got bored, and maybe you just didn't choose your concept or your strategy right. And you maybe need to shift your whole show if you want to keep podcasting. It's when many of them start new podcasts altogether, they realize the first one didn't work. But in this case, what happens is when at 11 and 23, you're not getting enough engagement back. You're not getting enough people going, oh yeah, I love this podcast. It's great. It's too soon. You haven't earned the right for their engagement yet. You haven't earned the right for feedback yet. So maybe the only people you're getting feedback from is your mom, your best friend from high school, whatever that is. And that's not enough. So you got to look at your stats. But sometimes your podcast stats can devastate you early on because it's not growing as fast as you expected it to. So we have side-by-side on our Podetize platform, it comes with every hosting package that we sell, is that we measure website stats and podcast stats side by side. That way you can see the growth because very fast, usually within 30 days, we see boosts to your website. We see growth. Now there's exceptions to that if you have a brand new website, but for the most part, we see a boost, we see a growth in the website stats and in the organic keywords that are being served up and authoritatively associated with your website happens faster than anything else than the podcast statistics themselves. So that's really important. And it's also really important to check the stats to see what you're doing right, what people like. Now, number 11, there's a whole story behind. I call this ego bait. And I named it because I was writing my column and I'd written all these great articles about really top celebrities and other people, and they weren't sharing it. And it was driving me crazy. It was like, what's wrong? Why aren't you sharing it? And then to top it off, they weren't putting the whole press opportunity that I gave them on their press page or on their media page on their website. So they weren't putting it on their website either, giving me backlinks and making sure that people could click through and read the articles I was writing or listen to the podcast. So it was really frustrating. So what I came up with was this idea of putting the host face and the guest face side by side, or the person featured in my article side by side, having a little show identity in the bottom, and the quote in the middle. The important part is it's not something your guest says. That's totally different. If it's your guest who's saying it and you want to put a quote, an inspirational quote about them, it needs to be just their face and the quote, and you push it out there on social media like this. This is different. This is to put you two side by side, put the episode side by side with you, and making sure that you say something about the host, about the guest. The host says something about the guest that makes them so excited to share this, right? They can't not share it. So now they're going to be sharing your episode. They're going to be out there sharing how you side by side, and people are going to check out your show because now you're associated directly with it. These types of posts are the most clicked and work the best. So we call this ego bait. It's an automated part of what we do for our follow-up, because we do guest follow-up as an automated part of all of our production services. So this is actually done for you in that scenario, but this is something you can do. And then we go one step further. When we send that email out to people, we put an embed code. We give exactly the code they need. They can copy and paste it, drop it onto their media page on their website, and exactly everything happens. The image pops up and it's linked through to the actual podcast blog page. Everything is going, because sometimes they'll just drop in the iTunes link and not the blog link. So you're not getting the direct value. You're sending those listeners to iTunes and they may not listen, they may not subscribe, they may not do all those things, but you could see the direct value in your blog page if you send it to them. So that's the embed code, and that's the code that we send to everybody. And so I think this is probably the most underserved, because if you're not following up with your guest, you're making a huge mistake that's not growing your show. And if your guest isn't sharing it, and if you're not pushing them to share it, then you're also making a mistake, because that's not growing your show either. So the last one we have is number 12, ad mixing. So this is one where some of you are taking ads. Some of you are taking ads today, or you're promoting your own stuff, or you're making announcements on your show. The problem with that is sometimes those announcements are timely, or set in time, right? So they're, you have a promotion that's going around because you're celebrating your 25th episode or your 100th episode or whatever that is, and you're offering a contest or product or something like that, and you make that announcement on the show instead of inserting it like an ad. And what happens is that, when people go back and binge listen a year later, they're hearing these ads that are outdated and something that they can't do. And that frustrates people. Who wants to listen to, Christmas ads in July, right? Unless you're actually having a Prime Day. So this is something that we created because we invented the Podetize ad mixing system, because I didn't want to pay to have my show re-edited to take stuff out. And so what we do here is that the ads are inserted, and they go in and they go out. They can go across your entire catalog of shows, so they can go across every single episode you do, but that's also a thing, because 60% of your listens will happen on your back catalog, not your 4 most recent episodes. So your 4 most recent episodes have a lower listen rate in the first month. They get more listens as they go across, because people are at different stages of listening to your show. They're binge listening, they're just finding you, and they're moving through that. So if you are taking money for your ads, if you're getting sponsors and you're selling them on your per episode rate, your average per episode rate, you're selling them too low. Your entire show might be doing 10,000 or 100,000 listens, and you could be making more money off of that if you could give them more placements. And you can, because you can remix the ads. You can take them in 30 days, you can take them out. So you can sell it on a 30-day basis. You can sell a month's worth of ad placement. Totally different sponsorship. And now also, when things don't work out, what happens when some supplement gets pulled off the market and it was on your health and wellness show? You have to re-edit your ad, or you risk putting your reputation on the line with your listeners. So that never happens. You can always pull the ad out, because they're inserted separately after the audio is originally edited. But more importantly, they are embedded. They are not streamed on the show. So this is some way. The other thing that I want to say is, be really careful about putting long ads right after the very first bumper. You should always have a little statement of saying something. Sometimes that music and intro, when I have it here, it's your intro bumper, but it might be you introducing your guest or talking about them. Those are some of the best places to put them, but having a very long ad, have a 15-second one or less as a pre-roll ad. That's the number one thing that we hear from listeners all the time. So these are some of the 12 mistakes. So why do I call this the new school brand casting? Well, that's the name of our company, Brand Casters. I call the new school of brand casting, these are the rules. The rules are, it's not all about me. Professionalism counts. And we want to be influencers, but we want to be influencers with authority, because that opportunity gives you opportunities to grow your authority and gives you ways to podetize, where you can have organic web traffic growth, you can have organic keyword growth, you can have engagement both on social and over your website, you can have qualified list growth, and we have higher list open rates, we have higher list engagement rates. That's what we see happen from our podcast listeners. Views, listens, stickiness, those things happen. And when they happen over your website, Google gives you more rewards for being more authoritative. You can get clients, products, do events, do promotions your own, or do joint venture partnership with others. You can do all of that, and you can be authoritatively in control of that. These are the ways that you can podetize. You can make money with your podcast. So I invite you all to become bingeable, to increase your influence plus authority. I invite you to listen to our podcast, Feed Your Brand, and the Center of Influence episodes are the ones that we do specifically, I do specifically, where I'm interviewing those top podcasters and getting their tip. I just had Haley Griffiths on, and she does the Science of Social Media, which is the Buffer podcast. I've done the Not Old Better show. He has a 50 plus audience that nobody thought would be listening to podcasts, but they do. There's some tremendous things to learn from listening to these shows. So I also want to give you a free gift. Insider media pitch secrets, free publicity, all of that is at feedyourbrand.co, PR now. Those are things you can do today. You can become a part of our free guest directory. You can get publicity. You can maybe even get featured in my Authority Magazine column. So go ahead and go there and follow the directions, and you'll be able to find what you need there and be able to apply and move through and into the Authority Magazine stuff. And also find out how to get more publicity for your show, because that's what really counts. So I really hope this has been helpful for you, and I would love to invite you to come and have your show reviewed with us, to have us look at it, assess it. Are you as good as you think you are? Could you be better? What could happen? I invite you to go to podetize.com/inquiry and make an appointment today. We're going to open up some extra slots because we're traveling next week, so we're going to open up some extra times so you'll be able to find some times that work, maybe even over the weekend. And we'd love to really help you assess your show, see what you're doing, see what you could be doing better, see how you really could be growing your show and making more money podcasting and removing all of these mistakes. Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing how your podcast goes. So make sure and share us out. Make sure and ping us. Friend us on Facebook, iTunes. Subscribe. We'd love for you to subscribe to our show. Instagram and YouTube. We're everywhere. So at Feed Your Brand is typically where we are at for that instead of at Podetize. Thanks everyone. Have a great night.